Alrighty, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk to you and learn more about you. I always start with the same question, which is, when did your creative journey begin?
What I currently do now, like my sort of professional practice, I would say is quite easy to pinpoint, and that's the end of 2012. My creative journey as a whole, probably sort of earlier back when I was a teenager, when I was considering what I wanted to do for work, for the rest of my life. And I was going to do something that had nothing to do with art. But then I went to university and I studied illustration at university. So just lots of drawing, basically. My sort of professional practice began shortly after I graduated at the end of 2012. And yeah, basically my fairly kind of niche sort of style, if you like, of what I do, that started in that year in 2012, and that kind of allowed me to transition into doing this full time, really. So I would say, yeah, I would say 2012 is probably, that's kind of what I consider to be the start of my practice.
You told me that art is not a hobby resonated with you. And what does that mean to you personally? Or like, why did that resonate with you?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think art can be a hobby, but I understand the sentiment of the statement. Art is not a hobby. I get that from, sort of professional point of view, that it can be a lot more than a hobby. I think when I started out, I had a lot of support from a lot of people, and when I say started out, I suppose what I really mean there is making my first choices when I was younger, going into art as a career, which was basically choosing to go to art school. I wanted to do something very different. I was going to be a pilot. That was my interest. That was where my interest lied, and that involved doing more academic things. But I used to love flying. I did learn to fly light aircraft, and I was going into all of that world, and that was kind of what I wanted to do with my life. But I always had this thing of like wanting to be creative, and it was kind of what I was naturally good at. It was like my natural strength. I've never been a particularly academic person, so it was almost like that kind of, it was kind of deciding, okay, like this is what I feel like I should probably do. And when I came to apply for university, well, actually, it was a little bit before. It was when I applied for college, which I'm trying to think. I know in the States, the structure is slightly different. College is before university in this country. So yeah. Anyway, when I was looking at my education options, like further education, higher education, I realized that it was something creative that I wanted to do. And I had support from people, but I also had people that genuinely had my best interests in mind, who, were saying, do you really want to do this? Like, it's quite, this is like really risky going through this line of work. And I remember, I think it was my mum that said, if you don't go down this path, like if you don't try and pursue your creative goals, you will never know. Like, you'll spend the rest of your life kind of just thinking like, hey, what if kind of thing. So that was really helpful, because I thought, well, okay, I can give it a go, give it a try. And yeah, it kind of went from there, really. I mean, even right through university, I still didn't really know what my career would look like. As a graduate, as somebody who studied an art-related subject at uni, and then being in the real world. And I remember asking my course leader at the time, when I was doing the interview for the illustration course, I remember asking him if there was assistance in getting graduates jobs, like in the real world, like jobs in illustration, like once we all graduate. And he not rudely laughed, but he chuckled, let's say, And he basically said, there are no jobs in illustration. It is a freelance culture. It's not about getting jobs. So even back then, I had like no idea of what my kind of work would look like, or what my sort of prospects would look like. And yeah, I mean, he was right. Like, there aren't really, I mean, there are jobs. You get like in-house jobs and things like that, doing sort of design work, or illustration, that kind of thing. I don't really know a whole lot about that, because, as I say, I've not positioned myself as an illustrator. Everything I do is largely self-initiated. And it's funny because, yeah, I don't have a job. Like, I'm self-employed. I run a business, right? And people can say, well, that can all go tits up, it can all go wrong, kind of thing. And it's like, well, you could have a job, and that is your one job, that is your one stream of income. So actually, full-time employment can go tits up, right? You could lose your job, you could be made redundant. So I think, as a creative person, I think running your own business, you make the opportunities and you diversify what you do. I think running a business, I think, can be as creative as the creative thing itself, right? I think it benefits the business, benefits from that kind of approach. So I feel pretty secure. I feel because I'm in control. I'm not relying on one stream of income. I'm doing what I do, and there are different facets to that, because that's the way I've set it up.
I'm so glad that your mom told you to go for it, and that you won't know until you try, and then you did, and now you went to school, you're confused, you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm gonna do after. How did you figure out to go into this path of where you are now?
I was just, yeah, when I left university, I was kind of just working on like a number of different things, like different ideas and things that I wanted to explore creatively, not really knowing kind of what the bigger picture was, or where it was going. I almost didn't really, I was just trying to find my feet, right? Because I left university July, I think it was, no, well, it was around summer anyway. Summer 2012 is when I graduated from uni. And I suddenly, had no studio to work in. I had no sort of peers around me, no kind of, oh, you've got to do this work by this date. This is,
Right.
It was all kind of like free fall. And I knew that I wanted to carry on just making art and just sort of continuing with some of the ideas I was exploring at university. But as I said, I didn't really know where that was going. And I think I just thought, well, I'll just keep making art for a bit on the side, and I'll try and get a job, like a proper job. I shouldn't say that, because art is a proper job, but a more structured job, let's say. And I did. I got a job working as a barista in a coffee shop, and I really loved it. It was actually like probably one of the best jobs I've had. I really loved the people that I worked with. And in the end, I was there for about 2 weeks before I handed in my notice, because one of the things that I was exploring in terms of like the ideas that I was still carrying on with sort of in uni and after uni was working with maps. I just started doing that as this kind of interest that I wanted to explore. And I kind of stumbled into that sort of fairly sort of incidentally. It wasn't like this is definitely something that I want to do. It was just this kind of thing that I came across one day in a charity shop. I bought an old map in a charity shop because I just really liked the patterns. I really liked the colors, and I just thought, I'll have this. I'll put it in my studio, and I just put it on a pile of other stuff in my studio, because that's sort of I'm a bit of a hoarder. That's like the kind of person I am. I like sort of collecting things and unique things, old things. And yeah, I just started working with that one day, just as a sort of surface for drawing on, which was kind of related to the work I was doing at uni. But that initial experiment that basically went viral in the early days of, I suppose, virality on the internet. It was on Tumblr. It sort of gathered lots of notes and reposts and things, and I had people asking me about prints of it. I had people asking if I do commissions, and I was like going to work every day at this point as a barista, and I was kind of like, well, I've maybe got an opportunity here. So I quit my job and I just sort of threw myself into basically forming a business, forming a professional practice. And yeah, I went from there really. It was a lot to learn. And a lot happened sort of very quickly. But that's like every day now. It's kind of, it's continually growing. And I mean, that was 14 years ago, and it's shot by, but at the same time, it's like, a lot has happened since then. So,
talking about your work, how long does it take you to do a piece? And also, when you start with a map, do you see an image? Like, do you see a face, or does it come as you go?
So I don't see faces in maps. I see kind of like I see like opportunities for things. I see kind of starting points in the composition that then kind of are frameworks for me to work within. I see things that I almost like gestures in the landscape. I see kind of like sort of, it's almost like I sometimes describe my process as the landscape's asking a question, and my process is about answering that question. So there's kind of like a predetermined structure, predetermined composition, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to complement that composition. So yeah, I don't see faces in maps as such. I don't actually look for like perfect synchronicities. I look for things that complement other things. I look for patterns that complement other patterns, that sort of thing. The completion time for what I do, it really varies depending on like the kind of size and the complexity of what I'm working on. And also obviously if there's like a deadline, if it is a commission, or if there's, it's like an exhibition deadline or something like that, that tends to make me work quite a lot faster. Otherwise, I like to sort of juggle things. Like I have kind of multiple things on the go at any one time. I have a washing line in my studio. I can sort of just turn my thing like slightly there. So this is kind of where I have sort of like works in progress, things that I've yet to start, things that are underway, and also just things that I can't really be bothered to put away properly because I have my plan chest, but maps are an absolute nightmare to fold back up sometimes. They're very easy to unfold, but folding them back up is a real problem. So I tend to just kind of keep things out. But some of those pieces, the reason I show those, this large one here, just above where I'm pointing now, I've had that on the go for years now, and it's become kind of a warm-up piece for me. I will finish it one day, but it's sort of become this thing that I'm like, okay, like I've not drawn for a while, or I'm a bit out of sorts, or I've been doing something different. I just need to get my hand going again, and I sort of get that down. And because there are like large areas, like large swathes of parts of it that I can just work on, but it will be finished one day. So it takes anything from like a few days to answer your question for like smaller things that I do, to months or even years for the larger things. But they tend to be the pieces that I rotate and I work on different things at different times. The longest thing I've ever worked on, like in terms of the time, is the album artwork I did for John Lennon and Universal Music. That was a really big undertaking, and that took solidly, in terms of like, that took months of work, like solidly. And I did have to rotate it because I did have other commitments as well. But if I added up all that time, it was months and months of work. So that was a pretty big undertaking.
Do you think that the process of your art and the time that it takes has taught you something as a person?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's taught me a lot about investment and long payoff in things that are very time consuming, and things that you don't necessarily see the immediate solution to. You're kind of blind to, it's kind of like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of the time I have to, some of the larger pieces especially that I work on, I have to put so much time into them before I even reach the ugly stage of the drawing, and then it's like even longer until I can actually kind of picture something that is complete. And sometimes I'm not happy with things. You know, a lot of the time I'm not happy with things. I abandon lots of pieces. I've got a whole drawer in my plan chest of just pieces that I'm like, for whatever reason, I've just put them to one side, and I may come back to one day. But realistically, I think it's not finishing things and also failing things, like creating things that you're not happy with. That's just part of being an artist. It's just part of being creative. So I think, yeah, you have to have faith in that process, even though realistically, you know, what you're working on might not live up to your standards. It might not be what you want it to be, and it might not get finished. Chances are, in my case, most of what I work on, because I plan my pieces and I kind of know, I sort of know intuitively what I think is going to work well. But I'm still experimenting as a creative. I'm still trying things, and I'm still trying to just push myself out of my comfort zone. But of course, with that comes risk. So you have to take that risk on board if that's the way you want to work, if you want to continually develop. And you have to accept that failure is possibly going to be part of that process. And that can be difficult when you're working on something that, as I say, takes a very long time before it even reaches its sort of mid stage. It's I just have to put on like a podcast or like some music or something and just kind of like go into my world and just work on this thing, and just be at one with this thing and just not think about really sort of anything. It's got to be, I've got to feel like I'm spending the time well, and I have faith that, you know, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But for that reason, it's I always say my process is patience building, not patience testing. And I think that's something else that my work has given me, is it gives me a kind of sense of grounding and a sense of peace that, most of the time anyway, not all of the time, but most of the time, that most other things don't give me. There's no sort of quick, fast payoff with what I do. I'm not throwing paint at a canvas, and even if I was, that is also, you know, I can't speak for that kind of process, but I feel what I do is very meticulous and very controlled, and it's extremely labored. And that's not to say that, you know, there's more skill in that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the payoff is much longer, and I have to just have faith that that payoff does come. Payoff in terms of emotional payoff, just being happy with the work as an artist, but also literal payoff, like I finished this thing, I can sell it now, or I can, you know, it can go to whatever exhibition, gallery, wherever. So
Right. I mean, I know you don't do as much commission work, but do you find it easier than coming up with your own original work?
yeah,
Not because of the guidelines. Like what I'm curious.
it's a bit of a mixed bag. I always think, in theory, I find it easier to do my own self-initiated work, but it's funny because the actual work that I create is almost it's almost a metaphor for this thing, right? So working with maps, I don't have the kind of stress, if you like, of a blank sheet of paper. And I call it stress because I'm not used to working with blank sheets of paper or blank canvases. I have a starting point with everything I do. I have this framework that already exists, and it inspires me. You know, it's like, this is the thing on the paper, and I'm working within those constraints. And I think that's kind of exactly the same for the sort of bigger picture of what I do. When I can choose to draw anything over any location, I'm sometimes paralyzed by that sense of openness. There are just so many options with, you know, my map collection is like huge as well. That's another reason why I have things hanging on this line, is because when I put things away, I forget that I have them. And you know, on a very regular basis, I receive maps. I have maps coming all the time, and it's like, I look at them and I'm like, hey, this is cool, this is great, and then I fold it up and I put it away, and I just forget that I have it. So yeah, I think the openness with self-initiated work, it can be really difficult. It can be very appealing as well. So I think there's definitely a balance there. But one thing I do like about commissions is, yeah, that sense of constraint, and that, you know, this is the location I have to work with. It narrows, it immediately starts to narrow things down, and I find that actually quite helpful. It can be a hindrance sometimes, especially working with an external material like maps, like I do, where very often I'll have commission inquiries that just will not be possible because I just cannot source the right sorts of maps that I would like to work with for the commission. Commercial commissions, that's even more so the case, because you know, working with maps, I have to be aware of copyright issues and sort of things like that. So working with commercial commissions where there's reproduction involved, you know, there's even more of a constraint there. So, but that again, it can be helpful. It can be really helpful. So it can kind of narrow down your focus and narrow down what you're doing. But it's a bit of a balance, really. I think sometimes when I'm doing lots of commissions, I kind of crave my own sort of, you know, my own freedoms a bit. But equally, when I'm really fully in the depths of my own work, I just think, oh, you know, it'd be really nice to be working on a commission right now. So, yeah, it just gives you a bit more focus. But I don't generally do commissions these days. I do commercial commissions, and that's pretty much it. I don't really do a lot of private commissions. I do make the odd exception, but generally I don't, at least at the moment.
Yeah. What's one habit or mindset that has essentially led to a sustainable creative career for you?
I think consistency, and actually that's something that I also struggle with. But I think being consistent is key, and that can mean lots of different things, whether it's just consistency in terms of like showing up, either on social media or, you know, with an email newsletter, sort of having a target number of shows that you might want to participate in every year. I think that really helps, because I mean, I'm a person of momentum. So when I drop the ball with things, even if I like go on holiday for a week, you know, it's kind of hard. Like sometimes it's hard for me to like pick that ball up again and get it rolling again. So for me personally, yeah, consistency as a habit, I suppose you can call, I mean, it is a habit, but it's one that I'm still trying to master. You know, I'm 37 this year, and I still feel like I'm like, you know, next year is going to be the year that I get a better creative routine. I'm going to, you know, and I'm just hodgepodging my way through life. But it's kind of been working. You know, it's so I want to try and improve on that. I want to try and be a more consistent person.
Now that you're living and you're a full-time, now that you're living, you've always lived as a full-time artist, what's something that you were not prepared for?
For me, I mean, this is something that's changed for me over time, but I think for quite a long time, and it's kind of more of a personal thing, I guess, but I was quite lonely for quite a long time. I started when I left uni, obviously that was 2012, had lots of peers around me. I was in a, you know, lively place, and one of the reasons I wanted to go into art when I was younger is I perceived it to be a very sociable, well-connected sort of lifestyle, like going to lots of exhibitions and meeting lots of people and always being around people. But actually the reality of it, when I started renting my own studio, is I was working on my own for a lot of the time, for many years actually. And the thing that probably maybe possibly annoys a lot of people about certain types of employment is you know, working with other people, public facing jobs, you know, working in hospitality, that kind of thing, service industries. That was kind of the thing that actually I started to miss, was just being connected with other people, even just on a day-to-day level. Because the reality is, you know, you're not going to go to exhibitions like all the time. You're not going to, you know, even just going to work, going to the office and seeing your co-workers every day. If you're, yeah, I lived on my own for a long time as well. So that was kind of like, I would go for quite long periods of time without talking to anybody, which is kind of sad really, but that was just one of those things that, as I say, it's more of a kind of personal life thing, because you know, it doesn't have to be like that. But I lived in the middle of nowhere as well for quite a long time. I I lived in quite a remote place. But then I met my partner, and now we run the business together. She does like so much of a lot of the work, and we're lucky to be together basically all the time. And we live in a more active place now. We go out more and we do more things. So that's something that's changed for me over time. But it was something that I wasn't really prepared for, because I was always thinking like, oh, it's going to be fairly, active and social line of work. Because even using things like social media as an artist, social media is not actually really that social. Not all the time. It can be, but not all the time. So.
Yeah, no, that is, I mean, that's probably one of the most truthful things ever, is that it is a lonely work, because you have to be focused and by yourself a lot when you're creating.
I wish I could listen to music more as an artist, and I do, and I do more nowadays, now that I don't have that same feeling of isolation that I used to have. But when I felt more isolated doing this line of work, I couldn't really be alone with my own monologue, internal dialogue, whatever you want to call it, like and having music on or whatever, that or having silence, that was the worst for that. So I would listen to the radio a lot, or podcasts or things like that. So but now that's not so much the case. I'm quite happy with my inner monologue these days, so I tend to listen to more music now than I ever did before.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Has the way that you define success changed now versus then? What does success look like for you today?
Yeah, I think it definitely has. Success for me when I was younger was more about big ambition and sort of making a big name for myself, and just kind of, I don't know, I was a different person when I was younger. I think I felt like I could sort of do anything in the world and go anywhere and be anybody that I wanted to be. And it sounds really sad to say that that's kind of tempered down a little bit as I've gotten older, but I actually don't think it's sad at all. And I think it's just, for me at least, it's just been a part of maturing and growing up, and just being more at peace with who I am and what I want from my life. And that's not necessarily really big things. It's a lot of small things. It's just being able to be at home every day with my partner, which is the case. And I feel fortunate that that's the case. It's about just simple pursuits for me, cooking, gardening, just spending my time doing slow things. Maybe it's just I'm just getting old, I don't know, but I that's my, that's what I want from my life now. That is my life, it's so that's success to me now. It's a lot more humble. I think it's a lot simpler now, just being able to support myself and my partner to have that kind of life, instead of feeling the need to travel around the world and have my name in lights and all of that. And I think there's still an element of some of that. I mean, as an artist, like you want to do kind of big shows and things like that, and obviously you want to make a name for yourself. But I feel like, in a way, like I checked some of those boxes, like as my career developed. I've done, I've won awards, I've done sort of big client work, I've done, there's sort of achievements that I've ticked boxes of. And the reality is that you don't really feel like you've like made it at any point. In fact, the more boxes you tick, the more boxes that reveal themselves. It's kind of like a false summit, right? It's like you're climbing a hill and you think you're at the top, but then you notice there's even more hill when you get to the next bit, and it kind of feels like that. And it's quite exhausting. And I think it's not a case of like, oh, I don't want to achieve things anymore, I don't want to tick like those career boxes anymore. It's more just a case of like, I have to take the enjoyment in other things, because that's not what I want my life to be about. I don't want to just be constantly chasing, you know, any kind of professional validation or anything like that. Like, I don't want that to be the focus of my life. So yeah, I've slowed down a lot, and yeah, I think it's just maturing, basically. I think it's just becoming an older person, a more mature person, maybe, but just with slightly different goals, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I think it's lovely. I think, yeah, I understand. Okay, one advice you would give emerging artists.
It's got to be about, you have to put the work like at the core, and it sounds really obvious to say that, but if you're not passionate and fired up about what it is you're creating, if you don't find purpose in the process itself, and the real burning desire to create and to pursue this thing, like it, you can't just fall into this line of work. You can't just kind of slip into it and coast along and be like, you know, oh well, you know, what I'm making is all right. You have to really put yourself into that, like, you know. And yeah, as I say, I feel like that's stating the obvious a little bit, but I think some people kind of forget about that. I've seen people that kind of more interested maybe in the business side of it than the actual work itself, and it's difficult because you know, there is a balance to be had. Like I sometimes think if I wasn't doing what I do full time, I would probably have more time to make art, which is kind of funny, but there is a lot of distractions. You know, there's a lot of other stuff around, but ultimately at the end of the day, the bottom line is it's got to be about the work that you create, and that's got to kind of, you've got to build everything else around that. Otherwise it's you can't kind of start thinking like, you know, I'm gonna make money this month to pay for whatever, like what can I do for that? You sort of do have to have a degree of that, but it's still got to be from the point of view of the work. So everything I make now, I make sure I'm doing it with intent, with purpose, and that I'm enjoying what I'm creating. And I'm also then thinking, but what am I going to do with this? Like, how, like, am I going to make prints of this? Is this going to go into such and such an exhibition? And if I don't know the answers to those questions, I might still want to make the work anyway, because that's the thing that's what counts, right? So there's that. And I would also say, I'm kind of stealing this advice a little bit from a friend of mine, but it's kind of another simple one, but it is so true. And that is that advice often contradicts other advice. So in other words, don't take all advice, and, you know, kind of expect that different things apply to different people in different situations. You could get advice from one place and it might completely contradict something else. So it just confuses everything even more. But you just got to find what works for you, and it's a long, arduous process. But it's very rewarding if you can make it work. And don't dwell on the worst possible things that can happen, because the best possible things that can happen often get overlooked. You know, like the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about stability and you know, art as a career, and having the idea of having one job versus, you know, forming a business that can, if you're self-employed, if you run a business, you could make nothing from month to month, but you could also make a lot of money. It really, there's no ceiling to that. So it's kind of like everybody focuses on the bottom part, but nobody really tends to look at the top, because realistically, if you're employed, there probably are certain ceilings and certain expectations, but when you run a business, it's entirely open. So think about the best things that can happen sometimes and be optimistic.
I love that. Okay. And then lastly, can you tell me 2 artists that you're excited about right now and that we should keep an eye on?
So, I mean, I follow lots of artists whose, you know, work I love, and there's a lot of names, but there's one artist that I think of, James Cook, typewriter artist. I think his work is phenomenal. I think his technique, his way of drawing with typewritten letters is just, yeah, it's just really out there. and what he's doing, you know, the way he's working and the kind of market he's positioned himself in, and you know, all the opportunities he's pursuing and the things he's achieving, it's a model for any aspiring artist. So yeah, James Cook, typewriter artist, definitely. And I also, for similar reasons, I really like the work of Roberta Boffo. She is somebody who is very much about the process and very much about her work. Her work, I think, looking at it from an outsider's perspective, is like a meditation for her. And I think I take a lot of inspiration from that way of working, because it's all about the process. And she, again, she's positioned in the kind of fine art market. She's doing some really amazing kind of print releases and selling originals and doing really great professional practice. So those are two artists whose work I absolutely love, but also everything around the work they create is really top notch. And yeah, definitely check them out.